To our amazing viewers at Cheating Tales Lab, we'd love to hear, which part of the world are you joining us from? Let us know. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1, The Breaking Point. Detective Ray Morrison had seen enough liars in his 22 years on the force to spot one from across a crowded room. What he never expected was to find one sleeping in his bed every night for the past 15 years. The evening started like any other. Ray had just returned from a double homicide scene, his mind still processing the brutality humans could inflict on each other, when he heard his daughter Emma's sharp cry from upstairs. At 17, Emma rarely showed vulnerability, but the sound that escaped her lips sent him sprinting up the stairs 3 at a time. He found her collapsed on her bedroom floor, clutching her chest, her face pale and contorted in pain. "Dad, I can't breathe properly," she gasped, tears streaming down her face. "Linda!" Ray shouted for his wife as he knelt beside Emma, his trained hands checking her pulse. Fast and irregular. "Linda, we need to get to the hospital now." His wife appeared in the doorway, impeccably dressed for another one of her boss's networking events. Linda Morrison, real estate maven and social climber, took one look at the scene and rolled her eyes with theatrical exasperation. "Oh, for heaven's sake, Emma. Not tonight." Linda's voice carried the same tone she used when discussing inconvenient weather. "I told you I have the Hartwell Group's annual party. This is the most important event of my career." Ray stared at his wife in disbelief. "Linda, look at her. Something's seriously wrong." "She's 17, Ray. This is what teenage girls do when they want attention." Linda adjusted her diamond earrings, checking her reflection in Emma's mirror. "She's probably stressed about that calculus test she mentioned." Emma's breathing became more labored, and Ray made his decision. He scooped his daughter into his arms, her slight frame feeling fragile against his chest. "I'm taking her to St. Mary's." "You're enabling her dramatics," Linda called after him as he carried Emma down the stairs. "She's manipulating for attention. Let her drama queen it out." Ray heard Linda's laughter as she spoke to someone on the phone, probably one of her real estate colleagues. No, I'm still coming to the party." Ray's dealing with Emma's latest performance. You know how teenage girls are. The drive to the hospital was a blur of red lights and Emma's labored breathing. Ray's hands gripped the steering wheel as his daughter drifted in and out of consciousness beside him. In the emergency room, the doctors immediately recognized the severity of her condition. "Acute arrhythmia," Dr. Patricia Reeves explained to Ray as they watched Emma through the ICU window, wires and monitors surrounding his little girl. "She has a previously undiagnosed heart condition called Wolff-Parkinson-White syndrome." "If you'd waited another hour, Detective Morrison." Ray didn't need her to finish the sentence. His daughter could have died while his wife prioritized networking and cocktails. Emma spent 3 days in the hospital. Linda visited once, bringing flowers and complaints about how the crisis had made her miss important client meetings. She spent most of the visit on her phone, handling urgent real estate deals. On the drive home, Emma was quiet until they stopped at a red light. "Dad," she said softly, "I heard what Mom said that night. About me being dramatic." Ray's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice gentle. "Your mom was scared, sweetheart. Sometimes people say things they don't mean when they're frightened." But Emma shook her head, wise beyond her years. "No, Dad. She meant it. She's always thought I was too much trouble." That night, Ray sat in his study, supposedly reviewing case files, but actually watching his wife through the window as she talked animatedly on the phone in the garden. Even from a distance, he could see her body language. Intimate, flirtatious, nothing like the cold distance she maintained with him. His phone buzzed with a text from his partner, Detective Carl Brennan. Anonymous tip came in about that Henderson murder. Witness says they saw a silver BMW leaving the scene. "Isn't that what Linda drives?" Ray stared at the message, his mind connecting dots he'd been unconsciously avoiding. The Henderson case, a prominent businessman found dead in his penthouse apartment. Ray had been the lead detective, and something about the crime scene had bothered him, though he couldn't put his finger on what. His laptop was still open to the case files. He pulled up the timeline and cross-referenced it with his own calendar. The night Paul Henderson died, Linda had claimed to be at a client dinner until midnight. But Ray remembered coming home late that night. Linda's car was already in the garage, cold to the touch. A cold realization settled in his chest, different from the rage he'd felt at the hospital, but far more dangerous. Ray Morrison had built his career on reading people, on understanding their motives and capabilities. He'd been living with a stranger. Chapter 2. The Investigation. Ray Morrison had always prided himself on his methodical approach to investigations. He applied the same systematic thinking to his marriage that had made him one of the department's most successful detectives. The results were more disturbing than any crime scene he'd ever processed. The morning after Emma's return from the hospital, Ray began his careful surveillance. 22 years of police work had taught him patience and precision. He started with Linda's phone records, using his department access to trace patterns that painted a clear picture of deception. For the past 8 months, Linda had been in constant contact with Paul Henderson, the same Paul Henderson whose murder Ray was investigating. The frequency of their communications increased dramatically in the weeks before Henderson's death, often lasting late into the night. Ray's hands remained steady as he printed the evidence, but inside, something cold and calculating was taking shape. The man who had spent his career seeking justice was about to become something far more dangerous. During his lunch break, Ray drove to Henderson's penthouse building. The doorman, Carlos, recognized him from the investigation. "Detective Morrison, any breaks in the case?" "Still working on it, Carlos." "Tell me, in the months before Mr. Henderson's death, did you notice any regular visitors? Particularly women?" Carlos nodded thoughtfully. "There was this blonde woman, real classy looking. Came by 2-3 times a week for months. Always used the service elevator, never signed in properly." Ray showed him Linda's driver's license photo on his phone. Carlos's recognition was immediate. "That's her. Last time I saw her was the night Mr. Henderson died. She left around 11:30, seemed real upset. Kept looking over her shoulder." The timeline clicked into place. Linda's client dinner alibi was crumbling, but Ray needed more than circumstantial evidence. He needed to understand the full scope of her betrayal. That evening, Linda announced she was working late again. Ray waited 30 minutes after she left, then used the tracking app he'd discreetly installed on her phone. She wasn't at her office. Instead, she was at the Riverside Towers, an upscale apartment complex across town. Ray parked in the shadows and waited. At 9:47 p.m., Linda emerged from the building with a man Ray recognized from the real estate magazines scattered around their house. Trevor Caldwell, the golden boy of Henderson Properties and Paul Henderson's former business partner. They stood close together in the parking garage, Linda's hand on Caldwell's chest in a gesture of intimate familiarity. Even from a distance, Ray could read their body language. This wasn't a new relationship. They'd been lovers for months, possibly years. Ray followed them to an upscale restaurant where they sat in a secluded corner booth. Using his surveillance training, he positioned himself where he could observe their conversation. Linda was animated, gesturing emphatically, while Caldwell appeared to be calming her down. Ray couldn't hear their words, but he could read lips well enough to catch fragments. "Police asking questions. Too close. Need to be careful." His phone vibrated with a text from Carl. Henderson's business partner, Trevor Caldwell, just became person of interest. Financial irregularities in their company. "Thought you should know." Ray typed back, "I'll look into it." But Ray was already far beyond looking into anything through official channels. As he watched his wife of 15 years laugh at another man's jokes, touch his hand across the table, and gaze at him with the warmth she'd stopped showing Ray years ago, something fundamental shifted inside him. Ray Morrison, the detective, was observing and documenting. But Ray Morrison, the betrayed husband, was planning something far more personal. The next morning, Ray found Emma in the kitchen, still pale from her ordeal, but trying to maintain normalcy. She was attempting to make breakfast with shaky hands, her medication making her movements uncertain. "Let me help, sweetheart," Ray said, taking the pan from her hands. "Dad, is everything okay with you and Mom?" Emma's directness caught him off guard. Ray studied his daughter's face, seeing Linda's bone structure, but his own steady gaze reflected back at him. "Why do you ask? She barely came to see me in the hospital. And when she did, she spent the whole time talking about her work or checking her phone." Emma paused, choosing her words carefully. It felt like she was visiting a distant relative, not her daughter. Ray felt the last of his emotional attachments to Linda crystallize into something harder and more purposeful. His wife hadn't just betrayed him. She'd betrayed their daughter during the most vulnerable moment of Emma's life. "Emma," Ray said carefully, "if something were to happen, if your mom and if things changed, You know you'd always be my priority, right? Emma nodded, a knowing sadness in her eyes that broke Ray's heart. I know, Dad. You're the only one who's ever really cared about me. That afternoon, Ray made a decision that would change everything. He called his lawyer, Marcus Webb, an old friend from his Army days who now practiced family law. Marcus, I need to see you. It's about Linda and Emma. And it's complicated. How complicated? Ray looked at the evidence spread across his desk. Phone records, photographs, timeline correlations, witness statements. The kind that ends marriages and destroys lives. I'll clear my schedule. As Ray prepared to leave for the meeting, he received a call from Carl. Ray, we just got a break in the Henderson case. Security footage from a traffic camera caught a silver BMW leaving Henderson's building at 11:32 p.m. the night he died. We're running the plates now. Ray knew whose name would come back on those plates. And he knew exactly what he was going to do about it. Chapter 3. The Setup. Marcus Webb's law office overlooked the city's financial district, a fitting backdrop for the destruction of Ray's carefully constructed life. Marcus, a bear of a man with prematurely gray hair, had served 2 tours in Afghanistan alongside Ray. He was one of the few people who knew exactly what Ray Morrison was capable of when pushed beyond his limits. Jesus Christ, Ray, Marcus said after reviewing the evidence spread across his mahogany desk. Your wife isn't just cheating. She's potentially involved in a murder investigation. Ray sat perfectly still, his hands folded in his lap. The security footage will confirm Linda's car was at Henderson's building the night he died. Her phone records show hundreds of calls and texts between them. And now she's involved with his business partner, who's about to become a person of interest. This is a prosecutor's wet dream, Marcus said, scanning the phone records again. But Ray, you obtained some of this evidence through questionable means. I'm not looking to prosecute her through the system, Marcus. I want to destroy her completely. Legally, financially, and personally. Marcus had seen that look in Ray's eyes before, during a firefight in Kandahar when their unit was pinned down by enemy combatants. It was the expression of a man who had calculated every possible outcome and chosen the most devastating path forward. What do you want me to do? Ray pulled out a thick folder. I want you to prepare divorce papers. I want sole custody of Emma based on Linda's emotional abandonment and potential criminal involvement. I want the house, my pension intact, and Linda gets nothing. Ray, even with all this evidence, she'll fight it. Caldwell probably has resources. Let me worry about Caldwell. Ray's voice carried a finality that made Marcus shift uncomfortably. Your job is to make everything legal and airtight. My job is to make sure she has nothing left to fight with. Ray left Marcus's office with a detailed plan that would unfold over the next week. But first, he needed to secure Emma's future and well-being. His daughter deserved better than becoming collateral damage in the war he was about to wage. That evening, Ray found Emma in her room, working on homework with the dedicated focus she'd inherited from him. Her heart monitor sat on her nightstand, a reminder of how close he'd come to losing her. How are you feeling, sweetheart? Better. Dr. Reeves says the medication should prevent any more episodes. Emma looked up from her textbook. Dad, I've been thinking about college applications. I know Mom wants me to stay local, but I got a partial scholarship offer from UC Berkeley. Ray sat on the edge of her bed. Berkeley was 3,000 miles away from whatever was about to happen here. Perfect. That's incredible, Emma. Berkeley has an excellent pre-med program. You think I should take it? I think you should grab every opportunity that comes your way, especially ones that take you somewhere you can build your own life. Emma studied her father's face with the same analytical intelligence he'd passed down to her. Dad, something's happening, isn't it? With you and Mom. Ray had always been honest with Emma, within age-appropriate boundaries. She deserved the truth, or at least as much as he could safely share. Your mother and I have grown apart, Emma. Sometimes people change, and sometimes they make choices that can't be undone. Is she having an affair? The directness of the question confirmed what Ray already knew. Emma was more aware of the family dynamics than either parent had realized. Yes, Ray said simply. Emma nodded, unsurprised. I figured. She's been different for months. More distant, more secretive. And she's never really cared about anyone but herself. Emma. No, Dad, it's okay. I stopped expecting anything from Mom a long time ago. The hospital just confirmed what I already knew. When things get serious, she disappears. Ray felt a surge of pride mixed with sadness. His daughter had inherited his ability to see people clearly, but she'd had to learn that lesson through painful experience. I want you to know that whatever happens between your mother and me, it won't affect your college plans, Berkeley, or anywhere else you want to go. The next morning, Ray put the second phase of his plan into motion. He called Carl with specific instructions about the Henderson investigation. Carl, I need you to expedite the BMW analysis. Also, pull Trevor Caldwell's financial records. Henderson's murder might be connected to their business dealings. You think the wife and business partner killed Henderson together? I think people do desperate things when they're cornered, Ray said. And I think Caldwell might be more dangerous than we initially realized. Ray's phone buzzed with a text from Linda. Working late again tonight. Don't wait up. Instead of the usual irritation, Ray felt only cold satisfaction. Linda's predictable patterns were making his job easier. That afternoon, Ray met with a private investigator named Diana Foster, a former FBI agent who specialized in corporate and personal surveillance. Diana had worked several cases with the police department and was known for her discretion and thoroughness. I need complete surveillance on 2 individuals, Ray said, sliding photos across her desk. Trevor Caldwell and my wife, Linda Morrison. I need to know where they go, who they meet with, and what they're planning. Diana studied the photos and the background information Ray provided. This is personal, isn't it? It's justice, Ray replied. The system is too slow and too forgiving. Some betrayals require more immediate consequences. Detective Morrison, are you asking me to help you with something that goes beyond surveillance? Ray met her gaze steadily. I'm asking you to help me document the truth. What I do with that truth is my decision. Diana nodded slowly. I'll need a week to establish proper surveillance protocols. You have 3 days, Ray said. After that, the window closes. As Ray left Diana's office, his phone rang. It was Emma, calling from school. Dad, I just talked to the guidance counselor about Berkeley. She says if I accept the scholarship, I could start as early as the spring semester. That's only 4 months away. That's wonderful, sweetheart. I want to take it, Dad. I want to get as far away from here as possible. Ray smiled for the first time in days. Emma would be safely in California before the full consequences of his plan became apparent. His daughter would build her new life free from the wreckage he was about to create. Then we'll make it happen, Ray promised. That evening, as Linda left for another client meeting, Ray sat in his study and reviewed the final details of his strategy. By this time next week, Linda and Trevor Caldwell would understand the full cost of their betrayal. Ray Morrison had spent his career bringing justice to the victims of crimes. Now he was about to become something more dangerous, a victim who refused to remain powerless. Chapter 4. The Trap. Diana Foster was worth every penny Ray was paying her. Within 72 hours, she had provided him with a complete dossier on Linda and Trevor's activities that went far beyond simple adultery. They met at a 24-hour diner on the outskirts of town, Diana sliding a thick envelope across the cracked Formica table. Your wife and Caldwell aren't just lovers, Diana said without preamble. They're planning to disappear together. I documented them at 3 different banks over the past 2 days, all under assumed names. Ray opened the envelope and found photographs of Linda and Trevor entering various financial institutions, along with copies of documents Diana had somehow obtained. The evidence painted a picture of 2 people preparing for a hasty departure. Caldwell liquidated his share of Henderson properties 2 weeks ago, Diana continued. $7 million, converted to bearer bonds. Your wife has been systematically emptying your joint accounts and transferring money to offshore accounts. Ray studied a photograph of Linda signing papers at a bank he'd never heard of. Her face showed none of the stress or guilt he'd expected. Instead, she looked excited, almost giddy with anticipation. How much has she taken? From your joint accounts? About $300,000 so far. But that's not the interesting part. Diana pulled out another set of documents. The interesting part is that they're not planning to leave the country. They're planning to fake their deaths. Ray looked up sharply. Explain. Caldwell has been in contact with a man named Viktor Kozlov, a Russian who specializes in creating new identities. The plan is elegant. They'll stage a boating accident off the coast. Bodies never recovered, presumed dead, while they disappear with Henderson's money and yours. This weekend, Caldwell rented a yacht, told the marina he's taking it out for a romantic weekend with his girlfriend. They're planning to scuttle the boat about 50 miles offshore, then rendezvous with a cargo ship that will take them to South America. Ray felt the familiar cold calculation settling over him. Linda and Trevor thought they were playing chess, but they were actually playing a game whose rules only Ray understood. "I need you to do something else for me," Ray said. "I need you to arrange a meeting with Victor Kozlov." Diana's expression shifted. "Detective Morrison, whatever you're planning." "I'm planning to give my wife and her lover exactly what they want," Ray said. "They want to disappear? They want new identities? I'm going to help them accomplish that in ways they never imagined." Friday afternoon, Ray received a call from Carl that set the final piece of his plan in motion. "Ray, we got a match on the BMW plates. It's registered to Linda Morrison. We need to bring her in for questioning about the Henderson murder." When? Monday morning. "I wanted to give you a heads up since this is going to get complicated for your family." "I appreciate that, Carl. Monday morning should work perfectly." Ray hung up and smiled for the first time in weeks. By Monday morning, Linda would be far beyond the reach of the police, but not beyond the reach of his justice. That evening, Ray found Linda packing a suitcase in their bedroom. She looked up with feigned casualness when he entered. "Oh, hi, honey. I'm going to that real estate conference in Miami this weekend. Last-minute invitation, but it's too good an opportunity to pass up." Ray nodded thoughtfully. "Sounds important. When's your flight?" "Tomorrow morning, early. I'll probably be gone until Tuesday or Wednesday." "That's fine. Emma and I will hold down the fort." Linda's relief at his easy acceptance was visible. She probably expected an argument, or at least some questions about the sudden trip. "Ray, I know things have been strained between us lately. When I get back, maybe we should talk about us. About making some changes." Ray studied his wife's face, noting the practiced sincerity, the calculated vulnerability in her expression. She was already planning her disappearance, but maintaining the pretense of working on their marriage. "I think you're right," Ray said. "When you get back, everything will be different." Linda smiled and kissed his cheek, the same perfunctory gesture she'd been giving him for months. "I love you, Ray." "I know exactly who you are, Linda," Ray replied, the double meaning lost on her. Saturday morning, Ray drove Linda to the airport, helping her with her luggage like the devoted husband she believed him to be. At the departure gate, she kissed him goodbye with what almost seemed like genuine emotion. "Take care of Emma for me," Linda said. "I always have," Ray replied. As Linda disappeared through the security checkpoint, Ray pulled out his phone and sent a text to Diana. "The targets are in motion. Initiate phase 2. Emma was still asleep when Ray returned home. He found her in the kitchen later, making coffee with the careful movements of someone still adjusting to heart medication. "Mom left early," Ray said. "I know. She came to say goodbye." Emma paused, studying her father's face. "Dad," she seemed different, almost relieved. "Did she say anything else?" "She told me to be good and that she might be gone longer than planned." Emma set down her coffee mug. "Dad, is Mom coming back?" Ray sat across from his daughter, choosing his words carefully. "Emma, your mother has made choices that have consequences. Those consequences are going to play out over the next few days." "Is she in trouble?" "The kind of trouble that people create for themselves when they betray the people who love them." Emma nodded slowly. She'd inherited Ray's ability to read between the lines. "What happens to us? You and I are going to be fine. Better than fine. But I need you to trust me completely over the next week, no matter what you see or hear on the news." "I trust you, Dad. You're the only person who's never let me down." That afternoon, Ray received a call from Diana. "Kozlov agreed to meet with you tonight, 9 p.m., at the Old Pier warehouse. He thinks you're a corrupt cop looking to disappear with stolen evidence money." "Perfect. What did you tell him about my situation?" "That you're facing internal affairs investigation, need new identity documents for yourself and your daughter, and you have $500,000 in cash to pay for his services." "And he believed it?" "Ray, half the cops in this city are corrupt. Kozlov specializes in helping criminals disappear. A dirty detective is just another payday for him." That evening, Ray kissed Emma goodnight and told her he had to work late on a case. It wasn't entirely a lie. He was working on the most important case of his life. The warehouse district was deserted except for the occasional freight train passing through. Ray found Victor Kozlov exactly where Diana had said he'd be. A thin, pale man in an expensive suit who looked more like an accountant than a criminal facilitator. "Detective Morrison," Kozlov said in accented English. Diana tells me you have need of my services. I need to disappear, Ray said simply. My wife found out about some side business I've been conducting. Internal affairs is closing in. I need new documents for myself and my daughter. Kozlov studied Ray with calculating eyes. Such services are expensive. Diana mentioned $500,000. Ray pulled out a briefcase filled with cash, money he'd withdrawn from his own accounts over the past week. This is just a down payment. I can get you another $1 million once I'm safely relocated. And you want to disappear completely? No trace, no way to track you. I want to die and be reborn, Ray said. Can you make that happen? Kozlov smiled, revealing gold teeth. Detective Morrison, making people disappear permanently is my specialty. In fact, I have 2 clients doing exactly that this weekend. Sometimes it's better to die than to face consequences of your actions. Ray felt a surge of satisfaction. Kozlov had just confirmed Linda and Trevor's plan while simultaneously agreeing to help Ray disappear. The trap was set. When can we begin? Ray asked. Monday morning, Kozlov said. My clients finish their business this weekend, then we focus on your situation. What happens to your clients? Kozlov shrugged. They become ghosts. New names, new faces, new lives in country that does not ask questions. Is beautiful thing, really. Complete transformation. Ray nodded thoughtfully. I'm looking forward to my own transformation. As Ray drove home, he called Diana one final time. Everything is in place, she reported. Caldwell's yacht is scheduled to depart at 6 a.m. Sunday morning. The cargo ship will be waiting 50 miles offshore at coordinates Kozlov provided them. And our insurance policy? Coast Guard has been anonymously notified of suspicious activity at those exact coordinates. They'll be monitoring the area starting Sunday afternoon. Ray smiled as he pulled into his driveway. By Sunday evening, Linda and Trevor would discover that disappearing forever was easier said than done, especially when someone who understood the game better than they did was controlling all the pieces. Chapter 5, The Reckoning. Sunday morning arrived gray and cold, with a storm front moving in from the Atlantic. Perfect weather for a tragedy at sea. Ray spent the morning with Emma, making pancakes and helping her with Berkeley application essays. To anyone watching, they appeared to be a father and daughter enjoying a quiet weekend morning while Mom was away on business. At 11:30 a.m., Ray's phone buzzed with a text from Diana. Target's departed marina on schedule. Yacht, second chance, heading southeast toward rendezvous coordinates. Ray typed back, understood. Maintain surveillance until Phase 3 initiates. Emma looked up from her laptop. Dad, is everything okay? You seem focused. Just work stuff, sweetheart. Nothing for you to worry about. But Emma had inherited Ray's intuition along with his analytical mind. This is about Mom, isn't it? About her not really being at a conference in Miami? Ray studied his daughter's face, seeing his own intelligence reflected in her eyes. Emma deserved to understand what was happening, at least in general terms. Your mother made choices that have put her in a very dangerous situation, Ray said carefully. She thought she was being clever, but she was actually being manipulated by people far more dangerous than she realized. Is she going to be okay? Ray considered the question seriously. That depends on decisions she makes over the next few hours. But Emma, whatever happens, you need to know that your mother chose this path. She betrayed our family, and she's about to discover that actions have consequences. At 2:15 p.m., Diana called with an update. The yacht reached the rendezvous coordinates. I can see them transferring to a larger vessel. Looks like a converted fishing trawler flying Panamanian colors. Any sign of the Coast Guard? Negative, but they're monitoring from beyond visual range. When that yacht goes down, they'll respond immediately. And Kozlov. His team is already aboard the trawler. But Ray, I'm seeing something unexpected. Kozlov has more men than agreed upon, and they're armed. Ray felt his pulse quicken. Define more men. 6, maybe 7 additional personnel. This doesn't look like a simple identity change operation. This looks like something much more permanent. The pieces clicked into place in Ray's mind. Linda and Trevor thought they were buying new identities and safe passage to South America. Instead, they were sailing into their own executions. Kozlov wasn't planning to help them disappear. He was planning to make them disappear permanently, along with all the money they'd stolen. Ray had intended to expose their theft and fraud, destroying their lives while keeping them alive to face justice. But Kozlov had his own agenda, one that would end with Linda and Trevor feeding the fish somewhere in the Atlantic. For a moment, Ray felt an unexpected surge of something. Not regret, exactly, but a recognition that his wife was about to pay a price far higher than even her betrayal deserved. Then he remembered Emma lying on the hospital floor, gasping for breath while Linda worried about missing a party. He remembered his daughter asking if her mother was coming back, already knowing the answer. "Diana," Ray said into the phone, "maintain surveillance, but do not interfere. Let this play out exactly as planned." "Ray, they're going to kill your wife." "My wife died the night she chose another man over our daughter's life," Ray replied. "What happens to the stranger who's been living in my house is not my concern." At 4:30 p.m., Ray received a call from an unknown number. "Detective Morrison? This is Lieutenant Commander Sarah Walsh, Coast Guard Station Atlantic City. We've received a distress signal from a vessel at coordinates you flagged for us. The yacht Second Chance appears to be taking on water rapidly. Any survivors visible?" "Negative. We're launching rescue operations now, but with this weather front moving in." Walsh paused. "Detective, the anonymous tip we received indicated possible criminal activity. Should we be treating this as a crime scene?" "Treat it as a missing persons case until evidence suggests otherwise," Ray said. "I'll coordinate with your investigation team once you've completed search and rescue operations." "Understood. We'll keep you informed." Ray hung up and found Emma watching him from the kitchen doorway. "Dad, that was about Mom, wasn't it?" Ray nodded slowly. "Your mother and her friend Trevor were on a boat that appears to have sunk. The Coast Guard is searching for survivors." Emma's face went through a series of expressions: shock, concern, and then something that looked almost like acceptance. "Are they going to find her?" "I don't know, sweetheart. Ocean searches are difficult, especially in bad weather." Emma sat down heavily on the couch. "I should probably feel worse about this than I do." Ray sat beside his daughter and put his arm around her shoulders. "You feel however you need to feel. There's no right or wrong way to process something like this." "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Did you know this was going to happen?" Ray looked into his daughter's eyes and made a decision that would define their relationship for the rest of their lives. Emma was 17, nearly an adult, and she deserved the truth, or at least as much truth as he could safely share. "I knew your mother was planning to disappear," Ray said. "I knew she was stealing money and planning to abandon us. I knew she was involved with dangerous people who didn't have her best interests at heart. Did you try to stop her?" "I gave her every opportunity to choose differently, to choose her family over her selfishness. She made her choice." Emma leaned against her father's shoulder. "I'm sorry she hurt you, Dad, but I'm not sorry she's gone." At 7:45 p.m., Lieutenant Commander Walsh called back. "Detective Morrison, we've recovered debris from the yacht, but no survivors. We've also found evidence of a second vessel in the area, fuel residue and trash that suggests a larger boat was involved." "Drug runners," Ray suggested, providing the Coast Guard with a plausible alternative explanation. "Possibly. We're coordinating with DEA and FBI to investigate potential trafficking connections. The yacht's passengers may have encountered something they weren't prepared for. Keep me informed of any developments." "Will do. And Detective, I'm sorry for your loss." Ray hung up and realized he felt nothing about Linda's death except relief that it was over. The woman he'd married 15 years ago had died months ago, replaced by a stranger who was willing to sacrifice everything, including her own daughter's life, for money and excitement. Monday morning arrived with news coverage of the mysterious yacht sinking. Ray and Emma watched the reports together over breakfast, both maintaining appropriate expressions of shock and grief for the cameras that occasionally captured them arriving at or leaving their house. Marcus Webb called at 9 a.m. "Ray, I just heard about Linda." "Jesus, I'm sorry." "Thank you, Marcus. Obviously, this changes our legal situation significantly. The divorce proceedings become moot, but the custody and financial issues actually become simpler. As Linda's widower, you inherit everything, including any assets she may have hidden." "What about life insurance?" "She had $1 million policy through her real estate company. Since there's no evidence of suicide or criminal activity on her part, it should pay out without issue." Ray smiled grimly. Linda's theft of their joint accounts would be more than compensated for by her life insurance. Sometimes justice found its own balance. "There is one complication," Marcus continued. "Trevor Caldwell's business partner, Paul Henderson, the one who was murdered. The FBI is investigating connections between Henderson's death, Caldwell's disappearance, and Linda's presence on that yacht. What kind of connections? The kind that suggest your wife may have been involved in more than just an affair. Ray, they're going to want to interview you and Emma about Linda's activities in the weeks before her death. Ray had anticipated this. We'll cooperate fully with their investigation. At 2 p.m., FBI Special Agent Catherine Rivera arrived at Ray's house with questions and condolences. She was thorough, professional, and clearly suspicious of the convenient timing of several recent deaths and disappearances. Detective Morrison, did your wife ever mention feeling threatened? Any indication that she was involved in something dangerous? Agent Rivera, my wife and I were having marital problems. She'd been distant and secretive for months. If she was involved in something criminal, she certainly didn't share it with me. And the night Paul Henderson was murdered, where was your wife? She said she was at a client dinner. I was working late myself that night, so I can't confirm her whereabouts. Agent Rivera made notes and asked several more questions before concluding the interview. As she prepared to leave, she paused at the door. Detective Morrison, in your professional opinion, do you believe your wife's death was accidental? Ray met her gaze steadily. Agent Rivera, I think my wife got involved with people and situations that were far more dangerous than she realized. Whether her death was accidental or intentional, it was certainly preventable if she'd made different choices. And you have no idea what those people or situations might have been. I wish I did, Ray lied smoothly. It might help me understand why my daughter has to grow up without a mother. After Agent Rivera left, Emma emerged from her room where she'd been listening to the interview. Dad, are we in trouble? No, sweetheart. We're the victims here. The FBI is just trying to understand what happened to your mother and Trevor. Will they find out about everything? Ray considered the question carefully. Diana had covered their tracks expertly. The surveillance equipment had been removed. The payments to Kozlov had been made through untraceable channels, and Ray's alibi for the weekend was ironclad. They'll find out that your mother was stealing money and having an affair with a man who killed his business partner, Ray said. They'll conclude that Linda and Trevor tried to escape with stolen money and encountered criminals who killed them for it. And that's not what happened. Ray smiled at his daughter's perceptiveness. That's exactly what happened, Emma. The only difference is that I knew it was going to happen and chose not to prevent it. Chapter 6. The Price of Justice. 3 weeks after Linda's death, Ray stood in the Berkeley admissions office with Emma, finalizing her early enrollment for the spring semester. The scholarship, combined with the life insurance money, meant Emma would graduate debt-free with opportunities Ray never could have provided on a detective salary. Dad, are you sure about this? Emma asked as they walked across the campus. I could defer for a year, stay home with you while you adjust. Emma, your life is beginning. Don't put it on hold because mine fell apart. Your life didn't fall apart, Dad. You took control of it. Ray looked at his daughter with a mixture of pride and concern. Emma understood far more about recent events than he'd told her, but she'd chosen to support him rather than judge him. It was both comforting and troubling. Promise me something, Ray said as they sat on a bench overlooking the campus quad. Promise me you'll never let anyone treat you the way your mother treated our family. And promise me you'll never become the kind of person who betrays the people who love them. I promise, Dad. But I learned those lessons from watching you, not from whatever consequences Mom faced. That evening, Ray received an unexpected visitor. Victor Kozlov stood on his doorstep, looking significantly less confident than he had at their warehouse meeting. Detective Morrison, we need to talk. Ray invited him in, curious about what had brought the criminal facilitator to his home. Emma was upstairs packing for Berkeley, giving them privacy for whatever conversation was about to unfold. You played me, Kozlov said without preamble. You knew exactly what would happen to your wife and Caldwell when you arranged our meeting. Did I? Ray asked mildly. As I recall, you were already working with them before we ever met. Yes, but you knew I would eliminate them once they outlived their usefulness. You used me to solve your problem while keeping your own hands clean. Ray studied Kozlov's face, noting the mixture of anger and grudging respect in the man's expression. Victor, my wife and her lover chose to steal money and fake their deaths to escape consequences. You chose to kill them rather than honor your agreement. I simply allowed both of you to make the choices that defined your characters. And what choice did you make? I chose my daughter's future over my wife's life, Ray said simply. I chose justice over mercy. I chose to be the kind of man who protects his family rather than enabling their destroyers. Kozlov nodded slowly. In my country, we would call you Vorvi-Zakwan, thief-in-law, man who lives by codes stronger than government laws. I'm not a criminal, Victor. I'm a father and a cop who decided that some betrayals demand permanent consequences. What happens now? You have what you wanted. Wife is gone. Daughter is safe. You have money and freedom. Ray considered the question. Now I go back to being Detective Ray Morrison, solving other people's problems and bringing justice to other victims of crime. And if I decide you're a threat to my operations? Ray's expression hardened, revealing the same cold calculation that had characterized his campaign against Linda and Trevor. Victor, you kill people for money. I kill people for principle. Which one of us do you think is more dangerous? Kozlov stared at Ray for a long moment, then smiled and extended his hand. Detective Morrison, I think we understand each other perfectly. They shook hands like civilized men discussing the weather, both acknowledging the mutual respect that existed between predators who operated by different codes but understood power equally well. After Kozlov left, Ray found Emma sitting on the stairs, having obviously overheard the conversation. Dad, who was that man? Someone who helped your mother disappear permanently, Ray said. Someone who won't be a problem for us. Are there going to be other people who might be problems? Ray sat beside his daughter on the stairs. Emma, when you choose to destroy people who threaten your family, you accept that other dangerous people might take notice. But those people also understand strength and respect it. So we're safe. We're safer than we were when your mother was alive and creating chaos in our lives, Ray said. But Emma, you need to understand something important. What I did to your mother, that was justice for our family. But it was also a choice that changed me permanently. I'm not the same man I was a month ago. Emma leaned against her father's shoulder. You're still the man who carried me to the hospital when Mom wanted to go to a party. You're still the man who put my future ahead of everything else. Those are the parts of you that matter to me. A week later, Emma left for Berkeley with 2 suitcases, a laptop Ray had bought her, and enough money in her account to focus on studies rather than survival. Ray drove her to the airport, both of them understanding that this goodbye marked the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. Call me every week, Ray said as they stood at the security checkpoint. I will. And Dad, thank you for protecting me. From Mom, from all of it. That's what fathers do, sweetheart. We eliminate threats to our children's futures. Emma hugged him tightly. I love you, Dad. I love you too. Go build the life you deserve. Ray watched his daughter disappear through security, feeling a satisfaction deeper than any he'd experienced in his police career. Emma would become a doctor, help people, build a family of her own someday. And she would do it all free from the toxic influence of a mother who had valued money and excitement over the well-being of her own child. The drive home took Ray past the marina where Trevor Caldwell's yacht had departed for its final voyage. The dock space was empty now, marked only by a small memorial plaque that mentioned 2 lives lost too soon. Ray paused to read the inscription, noting how it portrayed Linda and Trevor as victims of tragic circumstances rather than architects of their own destruction. History would remember them as unlucky lovers who died in a boating accident, not as thieves and murderers who met the justice they'd escaped through traditional legal channels. That evening, Ray returned to work for the first time since Linda's death. His colleagues offered condolences and support, all of them believing they were helping a grieving widower adjust to single parenthood. Carl Brennan approached Ray's desk with a new case file. Ray, I know you're still dealing with everything, but we caught a domestic violence case that needs someone with your experience. Ray opened the file and found photographs of a woman whose husband had beaten her unconscious while their 2 small children watched. The husband had been arrested, posted bail, and was already making threats against his wife for pressing charges. She's terrified he's going to kill her, Carl explained. Standard restraining order isn't worth the paper it's printed on. Guy's got connections, money, lawyers. Ray studied the photographs of the battered woman and thought about Emma lying on the hospital floor, about Linda laughing at her daughter's pain, about justice delayed being justice denied. I'll take the case, Ray said. Ray, you sure you're ready for something this heavy? You've been through enough lately. Ray looked up at his partner with the same cold focus that had characterized his campaign against Linda and Trevor. Carl, I'm exactly ready for this kind of case. Some people think they're above consequences. It's our job to prove them wrong. As Ray began reviewing the domestic violence file, he felt the familiar satisfaction of aligning his personal principles with his professional responsibilities. Linda and Trevor had taught him that sometimes justice required going beyond the limitations of legal systems and social conventions. Ray Morrison had learned to be judge, jury, and executioner when necessary. And there were always people who needed to learn that betraying innocent victims came with permanent consequences. Chapter 7. The New Normal. 6 months after Linda's death, Ray had settled into a routine that balanced his police work with regular video calls to Emma at Berkeley. His daughter was thriving academically and had joined the Pre-Med Honor Society, building the life she deserved far from the wreckage of their old family dynamic. Ray had also quietly become the department's go-to detective for cases involving domestic violence and family betrayal. His success rate in these cases was remarkable, though his methods had become more creative and less traditional. The file on his desk this morning involved Rebecca Martinez, a nurse whose ex-husband had violated their restraining order 3 times in the past month. David Martinez was a city councilman with political connections and expensive lawyers who had successfully argued each violation down to minimal penalties. Last night, David had broken into Rebecca's apartment while she was working a night shift at the hospital. He hadn't hurt her physically, but he'd left a clear message. Family photos with Rebecca's face scratched out and a note reading, "You can't hide forever." Ray studied the crime scene photos while drinking his morning coffee. David Martinez was exactly the kind of man who believed his position and connections made him untouchable. He was about to learn otherwise. Carl Brennan approached Ray's desk with the exasperated expression he'd been wearing more frequently lately. "Ray, Internal Affairs wants to talk to you about the Martinez case." "What about it?" "About your interview techniques. Apparently Martinez is claiming you threatened him during questioning yesterday." Ray thought back to his conversation with David Martinez. The man had sat in the interview room with his lawyer, smugly explaining that his visit to Rebecca's apartment was a misunderstanding, that he'd simply been retrieving personal property he'd left there months ago. "I told Mr. Martinez that men who terrorize women tend to meet unfortunate ends," Ray said. "I may have mentioned that domestic abusers have a high rate of accidental deaths and unsolved disappearances." "Jesus, Ray, you can't say things like that to suspects." "Why not? It's statistically accurate." Carl sat on the edge of Ray's desk, lowering his voice. "Look, I know you've been through hell with Linda's death, and I know these cases hit close to home. But you're starting to make people nervous." "What people?" "The brass. They think you're too emotionally invested in domestic cases. There's talk about reassigning you to property crimes or fraud investigation." Ray felt the familiar cold calculation settling over him. Being transferred away from domestic violence cases would limit his ability to help victims like Rebecca Martinez. More importantly, it would send a message that the department was protecting abusers over victims. "Carl, do you think David Martinez is going to stop threatening his ex-wife because we arrested him again?" "Probably not, but do you think the legal system is going to protect Rebecca Martinez from a man with political connections and expensive lawyers?" Carl shifted uncomfortably. "Ray, we work within the system. That's how this works. The system failed my daughter when her mother prioritized cocktail parties over heart attacks," Ray said quietly. "The system failed Linda when it allowed her to steal and murder without consequences until someone outside the system provided justice. And the system is failing Rebecca Martinez right now while we debate interview techniques." That afternoon, Ray received a call from Diana Foster, the private investigator who had helped him document Linda's affair and theft. "Ray, I heard you might need some freelance assistance with a case involving a city councilman." "I didn't ask for any assistance." "No, but Rebecca Martinez did. She's terrified, Ray. She knows the legal system can't protect her from her ex-husband, and she's heard about your success rate with similar cases." Ray considered this. Rebecca Martinez was a nurse who spent her days helping people heal. She deserved better than living in fear of a man who believed his political position gave him ownership over her life. "What kind of assistance are you offering?" "The kind that ensures problematic people understand the full consequences of their choices," Diana said. "David Martinez has some interesting financial irregularities that might become public knowledge if he continues harassing his ex-wife." "What kind of irregularities?" "The kind that involve campaign funds being used for personal expenses, including payments to the criminal defense attorney who keeps getting him out of trouble for stalking charges. Ray smiled. David Martinez was about to discover that his political connections could work against him as easily as they worked for him. Diana, I think Rebecca Martinez deserves to feel safe in her own home. I'll make sure she does. That evening, Ray was reviewing case files when Emma called from Berkeley. Dad, I just wanted to check in. How are you doing? I'm doing well, sweetheart. How are your classes? Challenging but good. I'm actually calling because I got a letter today. It's from Mom's life insurance company. Ray felt a chill. The insurance investigation had been closed months ago, with the death ruled accidental. What kind of letter? They want to interview me about Mom's state of mind before she died. Apparently, someone contacted them suggesting that Mom might have been planning something. Ray's mind raced through possibilities. Someone was trying to reopen Linda's death investigation, either law enforcement or someone with knowledge of the real circumstances. Emma, what exactly did the letter say? It's from an investigator named Thomas Garrett. He says new information has come to light suggesting that Mom's death might not have been accidental. He wants to interview family members about any signs that she was planning to disappear or fake her death. Ray felt the familiar cold focus settling over him. Thomas Garrett was either a legitimate investigator following up on new evidence, or he was someone connected to Viktor Kozlov or the other criminals involved in Linda's death. Emma, don't respond to that letter. Forward it to me, and don't talk to anyone about Mom's death without me present. Dad, you're scaring me. Is there something you haven't told me about what happened to Mom? Ray considered how much truth his daughter could handle. Emma was 18 now, legally an adult, and she'd already demonstrated remarkable strength in dealing with family trauma. Emma, your mother's death wasn't random. She got involved with very dangerous people who killed her for reasons that had nothing to do with boating accidents. Did you know this was going to happen? I knew she was in danger, and I chose not to warn her because she had already chosen her path over our family. Emma was quiet for a long moment. Dad, are we in danger now? I don't know yet, but I'm going to find out exactly who Thomas Garrett is and what he wants. After hanging up with Emma, Ray called Diana Foster back. Diana, I need you to investigate someone named Thomas Garrett. He's an insurance investigator asking questions about Linda's death. How detailed an investigation do you want? Ray thought about Emma's future, about the life she was building at Berkeley, about the victims like Rebecca Martinez who needed his protection. I want to know everything about Thomas Garrett, his background, his motivations, his connections, and most importantly, whether he represents a threat to my daughter's safety. And if he does represent a threat? Ray looked at the case files on his desk, at the photographs of battered women and terrorized children, at the evidence of crimes that would go unpunished through traditional legal channels. Then Thomas Garrett is going to learn the same lesson my wife learned, Ray said. Some people are too dangerous to leave alive. Chapter 8, The Final Test. Thomas Garrett turned out to be more dangerous than Ray had initially suspected, but not in the way he'd expected. Diana's investigation revealed that Garrett was a former FBI agent turned private investigator who specialized in insurance fraud cases. He was legitimate, thorough, and had developed suspicions about Linda's death based on inconsistencies in the timeline and witness statements. More troubling, Garrett had been hired not by the insurance company, but by someone calling themselves a concerned citizen who had provided him with detailed information about Linda's affair, her theft of family funds, and her presence at Paul Henderson's apartment building the night of his murder. Someone with intimate knowledge of Linda's activities was trying to expose the truth about her death, and they had enough information to potentially implicate Ray in her disappearance. Ray sat in his kitchen reading Diana's report while planning his response. Whoever had hired Garrett knew too much to be dismissed as a random threat. This was someone who had been watching the entire situation unfold, someone who understood the connections between Henderson's murder, Linda's affair, and the subsequent events. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Detective Morrison, we should meet. I have information about your wife's real killer. Tonight, 9 p.m., Riverside Park. Come alone. Ray stared at the message, his mind calculating possibilities. This could be the person who hired Garrett, or it could be someone else entirely. Either way, they were claiming knowledge that could destroy the carefully constructed narrative surrounding Linda's death. Ray texted back, "Who is this?" The response came immediately. Someone who knows you're not the only one with blood on their hands. At 8:45 p.m., Ray arrived at Riverside Park armed and alert. The park was mostly deserted except for the occasional jogger and dog walker. He found the specified meeting spot, a bench near the old gazebo, and waited. At exactly 9 p.m., a woman approached from the shadows. Ray recognized her immediately, though it took a moment for his mind to process the impossibility of what he was seeing. "Hello, Ray," Linda said as she sat down beside him. "Surprised to see me?" Ray's hand instinctively moved toward his weapon, but Linda held up her hands in a gesture of peace. "Before you do something we'll both regret, you should hear what I have to say." Ray stared at his supposedly dead wife, noting the changes in her appearance. Her hair was darker and shorter. Her face looked different in subtle ways that suggested minor plastic surgery, and she carried herself with a confidence that seemed almost foreign. "You're supposed to be dead," Ray said flatly. "I am dead, officially. Linda Morrison died in a boating accident 6 months ago. The woman sitting next to you is Isabella Santos, a citizen of Brazil with no connection to your former life." "How?" Linda smiled, the expression carrying none of the warmth he remembered from their early marriage. "Victor Kozlov is very good at what he does, but he's not the only one who can arrange disappearances. Trevor and I had a backup plan." Ray's mind raced through the implications. The bodies on the yacht. 2 of Kozlov's associates who outlived their usefulness. Trevor and I were never on that boat when it sank. We transferred to another vessel 20 miles offshore and watched the Coast Guard respond to the distress call. "Then where's Trevor?" "Trevor served his purpose," Linda said with casual indifference. "He helped me fake my death and transfer the money, but he was always meant to be a temporary partner. Men who betray their business partners can't be trusted not to betray their lovers." Ray felt a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. "You killed him. I eliminated a liability, just like you eliminated me. Or tried to, anyway." Ray studied the woman sitting beside him, looking for traces of the person he'd married 15 years ago. He found none. This was someone who had planned multiple murders, faked her own death, and eliminated her own lover when he became inconvenient. "What do you want, Linda?" "I want my daughter back." Ray's blood ran cold. "Emma is safe in California. She's building a life far away from all of this." "Emma is my daughter too, Ray. And now that I've successfully disappeared, I want her to join me in my new life." "That's not happening." Linda's expression hardened. "You don't have a choice. I hired Thomas Garrett to investigate my own death. I provided him with evidence of your involvement in my disappearance. If anything happens to me, if I don't check in with him every 48 hours, he goes to the FBI with everything." Ray felt the familiar cold calculation settling over him, but this time it was accompanied by something else, fear. Not for himself, but for Emma. "What evidence?" "Security footage of you meeting with Victor Kozlov. Financial records showing payments from your accounts to Diana Foster for surveillance equipment and services. Phone records documenting your coordination with the Coast Guard on the day of my supposed death." Ray realized he'd been outplayed by someone who understood him better than he'd understood her. Linda had anticipated his moves and prepared countermeasures. "Even if you have evidence, proving I was involved in your murder becomes difficult when you're alive to testify." "But I'm not Linda Morrison anymore, remember? Linda Morrison is dead, and her murder remains unsolved. I can provide testimony about my own death without admitting I survived it." Ray had to admire the elegance of her plan. Linda had faked her death so convincingly that she could now use her own murder as leverage against him while remaining safely dead in the eyes of the law. "What exactly do you want?" "I want Emma to know I'm alive. I want her to understand that I didn't abandon her, that I was forced to disappear to protect myself from your violence. And I want her to have the choice of joining me or staying with her father. Emma thinks you're dead. She's grieving and moving on with her life. Emma deserves to know the truth about both of her parents," Linda said. "About the mother who loved her enough to fake her death rather than let you use her as a weapon, and about the father who was willing to murder his wife to maintain control over his family." Ray felt rage building in his chest, but he forced himself to remain calm. Linda was baiting him, trying to provoke him into doing something that would prove her narrative about his violent nature. "You abandoned Emma when she was dying in the hospital," Ray said quietly. "You chose a party over your daughter's life. That's the truth she needs to know." "I made mistakes as a mother," Linda admitted. "But I never tried to kill my daughter's other parent. I never tried to kill you, Linda. I simply allowed you to face the consequences of your choices. And now you're going to face the consequences of yours." Linda stood up, adjusting her jacket with the same casual elegance she'd always possessed. You have 48 hours to decide, Ray. Either you help me reunite with Emma, or Thomas Garrett destroys your life and career. And if I refuse, then Emma learns that her father is a murderer, and I get my daughter back by default when you're spending the rest of your life in prison. As Linda walked away, disappearing into the shadows as suddenly as she'd appeared, Ray sat on the bench contemplating the complete reversal of his situation. For 6 months, he believed he'd won the ultimate victory over betrayal and deception. Now he realized the war was just beginning. His phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Dad, that investigator called me directly. He says he has evidence that Mom might still be alive. I'm flying home tomorrow." Ray stared at the message, understanding that Linda's final move was already in motion. His daughter was coming home to learn the truth about both of her parents, and Ray would have to decide how much of that truth she could survive. Chapter 9. Blood and Redemption. Emma's flight arrived at 2:30 p.m. the next day. Ray waited at the gate, watching his daughter emerge from the jetway with the confident stride she'd developed during her months at Berkeley. She looked older, more mature, and Ray realized she was about to face truths that would complete her transformation from child to adult in the most brutal way possible. "Dad," Emma said as she hugged him, "we need to talk about everything. The investigator, Mom, all of it." "I know, sweetheart. But first, there's something you need to understand. Your mother isn't who you thought she was, and I'm not either." They drove home in relative silence, both preparing for a conversation that would define their relationship for the rest of their lives. Ray had decided during the sleepless hours after his meeting with Linda that Emma deserved the complete truth, regardless of consequences. At home, Ray made coffee while Emma sat at the kitchen table where they'd shared so many conversations over the years. The afternoon light streaming through the windows seemed somehow different, charged with the weight of impending revelations. "Emma, before I tell you what really happened to your mother, I need you to understand something. Everything I did, every choice I made, was to protect you and secure your future. Dad, just tell me the truth. Is Mom alive?" Ray sat across from his daughter and looked into eyes that carried his own intelligence and determination. "Yes, your mother is alive." Emma's face went through a series of expressions: relief, confusion, anger, and finally resignation. "She faked her death." "Yes. And you knew about it." "I knew she was planning to disappear. I knew she was stealing money and planning to abandon us. I arranged for her plan to fail." Emma leaned back in her chair, processing the implications. "You tried to have her killed. I tried to have her face justice for her crimes. The people she was working with decided killing her was more profitable than helping her escape. But she survived. Apparently, she was smarter than any of us realized." Emma was quiet for several minutes, her analytical mind working through the timeline and implications. Finally, she looked up at her father. "Where is she now?" "I don't know, but she wants to see you. She wants you to choose between her version of the truth and mine." "What's her version?" Ray considered how to explain Linda's narrative without giving it more credibility than it deserved. "She believes I'm a violent man who tried to murder her to maintain control over our family. She believes she was forced to fake her death to escape my abuse." "And what's your version?" "My version is that your mother chose money and excitement over her family's safety and well-being. She betrayed our marriage, stole our money, and was willing to let you die rather than miss a social event. I made sure she faced consequences for those choices." Emma studied her father's face with the same intensity she'd inherited from him. "Dad, are you a killer?" Ray met his daughter's gaze without flinching. "Yes." "Did you kill Mom?" "No, but I would have if necessary to protect you." "Have you killed other people?" Ray thought about the domestic violence cases he'd handled over the past 6 months, about the abusers who had mysteriously disappeared or suffered fatal accidents, about the justice he'd delivered outside the boundaries of legal systems. "Yes." Emma nodded slowly, as if confirming something she'd suspected for months. "Are you sorry?" "I'm sorry that you have to live with the knowledge of what I am. But I'm not sorry for protecting you or for making sure dangerous people face permanent consequences." "What happens now?" Before Ray could answer, the doorbell rang. Through the front window, he could see Thomas Garrett standing on the porch with a woman Ray didn't recognize, not Linda, but someone who carried herself with official authority. "That's probably the investigator," Emma said. Ray nodded. "Emma, Whatever happens in the next few minutes, I want you to know that you're the best thing I've ever done with my life. Everything else, all the choices and consequences, were worth it to see you become the person you are. Emma squeezed her father's hand. I love you, Dad, and I trust your judgment more than I trust hers. Ray opened the door to find Thomas Garrett accompanied by FBI Special Agent Catherine Rivera, the same agent who had investigated Linda's disappearance months earlier. Detective Morrison, Agent Rivera said, we need to discuss some new developments in your wife's case. Ray invited them in, noting how Garrett studied the family photos on the walls with the intense focus of someone looking for psychological insights. Mr. Garrett has provided us with evidence suggesting that your wife's death may not have been accidental. Agent Rivera continued. We'd like to ask you and Emma some follow-up questions. Of course, Ray said. We want to cooperate fully with your investigation. Garrett opened his briefcase and pulled out a tablet displaying security footage. Detective Morrison, can you explain why you were meeting with Viktor Kozlov, a known criminal facilitator, 3 days before your wife's disappearance? Ray watched himself on the screen, entering the warehouse where he'd made arrangements for his own fake disappearance. The footage was clear enough to identify him, but didn't include audio of their conversation. Mr. Kozlov approached me about providing protection services for his clients, Ray said smoothly. I was investigating his operation as part of an ongoing organized crime task force. Do you have documentation of this investigation? The operation was classified and conducted through federal channels. Agent Rivera can verify that with her superiors. Rivera made notes, clearly uncomfortable with the jurisdictional implications of Ray's claim. Garrett pulled up another file. Detective Morrison, financial records show payments from your personal accounts to Diana Foster Investigations. What services did Ms. Foster provide? Personal security consultation during my wife's disappearance. I was concerned that whoever killed her might target Emma or myself. And these payments continued after your wife's death was ruled accidental. Ongoing security assessment. My wife was involved with dangerous people. Emma watched the questioning with fascination, observing how her father deflected each accusation with plausible alternative explanations. She was seeing firsthand the skills that had made him a successful detective. Agent Rivera looked up from her notes. Detective Morrison, Mr. Garrett has also provided us with testimony from someone claiming to have witnessed your wife's murder. Ray felt his pulse quicken but kept his expression neutral. What kind of testimony? A witness who claims your wife survived the boating accident and was subsequently killed by associates of Viktor Kozlov. Has this witness provided their identity to federal authorities? Not yet, but they've indicated willingness to testify in exchange for protection and immunity. Ray realized Linda was forcing the final confrontation. She was using the FBI to pressure him into cooperation while maintaining her own safety through anonymity. Agent Rivera, Ray said, if someone has evidence that my wife survived her supposed death, I would very much like to meet with them. As you can imagine, learning that Linda might still be alive would be significant for our family. The witness has requested a meeting with you and your daughter tomorrow evening. They want to discuss the terms of their cooperation with federal authorities. Emma spoke for the first time since the agents arrived. Where and when? Tomorrow night, 8 p.m., at the Riverside Community Center. The witness insists on a public location with multiple exits. After the agents left, Emma turned to her father with an expression of grim determination. She's going to try to convince me that you're the villain in this story. Probably. And if I don't believe her? Ray considered the question carefully. Linda had spent months planning this confrontation, and she wouldn't have arranged it unless she believed she could win. Then she'll probably try to kill both of us, Ray said. Your mother has become someone who eliminates problems rather than solving them. What's our plan? Ray smiled at his daughter's use of our rather than your. Emma had chosen her side in this conflict, and she was prepared to fight for it. Our plan is to end this tomorrow night, permanently. Your mother made her choices, and now she's going to face the consequences. Dad, are you sure about this? Once we do whatever you're planning, there's no going back. Ray looked at his daughter, brilliant, strong, uncompromising in her loyalty to the people who earned it. Emma had inherited the best parts of both parents, but had developed the wisdom to choose justice over convenience. Emma, some people are too dangerous to leave alive. Your mother proved that when she chose money over your life, and she's proving it again by threatening your future. Tomorrow night, we're going to solve this problem permanently. As father and daughter began planning for their final confrontation with Linda Morrison, Ray felt a sense of completion. He had raised Emma to be strong enough to face ugly truths and make hard choices. Tomorrow night, she would prove she had learned those lessons well. The woman who had abandoned her daughter in a hospital would finally face the consequences of betraying the two people who had loved her most. And Ray Morrison would complete his transformation from protector to executioner, ensuring that his daughter's future remained secure regardless of the cost to his own soul. Justice, Ray had learned, sometimes required blood. And tomorrow night, he intended to collect every debt Linda Morrison owed. The end. Epilogue. 6 months later, Emma Morrison graduated summa cum laude from Berkeley with early admission to medical school. The local newspapers covered her achievement, noting how the young woman had overcome family tragedy to excel academically. Detective Ray Morrison was promoted to lieutenant and became the department's most successful investigator of violent crimes. His clearance rate was unmatched, though his methods remained unconventional. Linda Morrison remained officially dead, her case closed with the conclusion that she had been killed by unknown criminals during a boating accident. The FBI investigation was terminated when their key witness disappeared without providing testimony. Thomas Garrett retired from private investigation and moved to Florida, where he spent his remaining years fishing and avoiding questions about his most famous unsolved case. Neither Ray nor Emma ever spoke publicly about the events at Riverside Community Center on that final evening. Some secrets, they learned, were meant to be buried with the people who created the need for them. Emma kept her mother's photograph in her dormitory room, not out of love, but as a reminder of what she would never become. Ray kept his service weapon clean and ready, knowing that some threats required permanent solutions. They had chosen each other over everything else, and they had won. The price of that victory was a secret they would carry together for the rest of their lives, bound by blood and the understanding that family protects family, regardless of the cost to everyone else. Ray Morrison had learned to be judge, jury, and executioner. Emma Morrison had learned to be his daughter in every way that mattered, and the world was safer for both lessons. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.